what I wish I knew at the time of each of these phases is to take advice from people who are as close to the next phase, the next immediate phase of the company and the problems that we need to solve as possible, versus taking advice from people who are too far removed, either in the forward direction or in the back, right? But there was a time where I tried to really learn from as many people as possible. And I think one thing I learned is like maybe like a neural net. If you feed too much noise into it, it actually gets confused, whether it's feeding it into a prompt or in the training data. Like it can actually create more confusion than it creates like, kind of coherence. And so I think being very selective about who and what you learn from at every phase. And you do have to come in with an opinion about, it's like shaping the source of learning for yourself. And so you have to come in with some thesis of the type of organization, business, product that you want to build in the next phase. Meaning, if you went in and talked to like 50 different really smart advisors, and they could be other founders, they could be VCs, they could be operators, like you could talk to 50 different best, in their own class, right? People, some from consumer, you could talk to like, the brilliant heads of growth at great consumer companies. You could talk to CEOs of really large enterprises. You could talk to X and Y and Z. But ultimately, and let's say it was us, right? Like going into that PLG to enterprise transition, if you're not coming in, if I'm not going in with a clear point of view of like, I think we need to become enterprise oriented. And I think what that means is actually that we have to have that strategic value prop to sell to the buyers, right? Then what you end up getting is like a scattershot of different perspectives that, if anything, just like pulls you in a million different directions. Or even like if you overgravitate to like one perspective that isn't aligned with the direction that you've set for the business. So it's a little bit of like having opinionation going into asking for advice that I think is really important. And, I think ultimately that's the only secret, right? Is like be very good at, asking for advice, but also be very good at shaping a perspective on who you ask for that advice, where you ask, and allowing that to kind of like create a positive reinforcement learning technique or approach of your own brain, right, at every phase. So, I think a lot of it's like these problems have been solved for each of the phases that you described of Airtable, right? Like every company initially has to just figure out like product market fit. And that's more about just figuring out like what's a problem, a TAM or a category or just a specific, type of customer problem that we can solve. And then, non-trivially, how do you build a product that solves that well and in a way that isn't an overfit of one customer, of one instance of that problem, right? Okay, you got that. Then how do you go and turn that into a business? How do you commercialize it? Like, what's the revenue model? Like, have you thought about that? Maybe you thought about it up front. And when you do have that revenue model, like it could be self-serve, like we had initially, like, how do you optimize it? How do you make it, kind of keep working really well? Like, how do you think about upgrade flows if it is self-serve? And if you want to add sales touch, like, how do you do sales, right? And then when it goes to the like shifting from PLG to enterprise strategic, kind of platform and sold platform, like, how do you do that, right? And so I'll give very tangible examples. Like, I think one of the, some of the best, kind of learnings and evolution I've had as a CEO in this current phase are from really great enterprise operators who very intentionally have very parallel, kind of experiences to what we're trying to do. So David Schneider, who was the president of ServiceNow from, I think, a few $100 million in revenue to many billions in revenue, and really was like the architect of a lot of their go-to-market systems and thinking, has been an advisor to us through Coach for years now. And likewise, George, who was the COO of Salesforce, and I've talked about Salesforce and ServiceNow as platform companies. It's no accident that George, as well as David, are both very close advisors to me. I consider them mentors, and have really helped shape a perspective on how can we build this business into the next phase. And at the same time, though, neither of them expect me to like literally take exactly what Salesforce or ServiceNow did verbatim and apply it to Airtable, because we're obviously a different product. We have PLG, which neither of those companies really had, especially at the later phases. And also it's a different era, it's a different phase, right? Like what worked back in 99 or 2002 may not apply now, right? And so like it's not a one-for-one translation, but it is like taking inspiration from the right and most analogous sources of learning.